About 2 fingers from the mic.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are at Edit Work. This is the first time I've been here, and it's a gorgeous location, as I'm sure you'll agree. So I want to first thank them for welcoming us and hosting this event. So I'm Louise from the Lisbon Digital Nomads Group. We're one of the largest meetup groups in Lisbon, and we hold lots of different talks for different demographics of our audience. And we have a lot of developers and people who code. So we thought this would be an ideal talk to actually co-host with the Google Developers Group in Lisbon. And Philippe has been amazing in gathering these amazing panelists we have today who are going to answer all of your questions, because I absolutely know nothing about this topic. So I'm going to hand over to Philippe to introduce his group.
Hello. So yeah, I'm from Google Developers Group, the second largest group in Lisbon. I'm here with Ines. Hello. So yeah, I was just going to tell you, yeah, we are organizing a big conference on the 8th of December. If you want to know more, talk with us. Okay, cheers.
And now I am going to introduce your moderator, Ash. Now, Ash is actually one of my colleagues at the Meetup group, and he happens to have been coding for, what was it you said, 18 years? I was like, oh, wait, did I count that right? But yes, a really long time. He's honestly not that old even. And he now consults for startups across the globe in various continents. So he's going to be asking a variety of questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I'll pass this mic around as well.
Hello. Yeah. All right. Okay. Are we going to sing Hakuna Matata now? All right. Let's do something. Great. So thank you all for coming, and thank you to all our panelists for taking the time out to be here with us. As nomads, one of the primary things we hope for is some kind of remote work. And it's usually pretty tough if you're a bartender or a nurse, but as a developer, you have quite a few options. So I'd like to introduce our panelists with us tonight. We have Andre, who's the front-end engineering and manager at GitLab. We have Gonzalo, who's come all the way from Porto, right?
Yes.
Thank you for taking the time to come all the way. He's the CTO for Todoist and Twist, and the parent company is called Doist, right?
Yeah.
And you guys are a fully remote team.
Yes.
Okay, that's beautiful. Perfect. And we have Pedro, who's from Landing Jobs, one of the well-known startups here in Lisbon, I would say. So yeah, if you guys want to take a few moments to introduce yourselves, and if you want to say something, yeah, please go ahead.
Sure, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I'm André. I'm a local. I was born in Portugal. I've been working in Portugal for all my life until February this year, where I joined GitLab. I was working on an office, so the remote life is pretty recent for me, but is one of those that I can't think of a reason to go back to an office. So, like I said, I joined GitLab in February, and I've been taking advantage of that ever since. And I'm looking forward to your questions, specifically about how we accommodate the hiring process and how we accommodate the developer's life and work in a remote-only company, because we have no offices. And as I was just saying outside, we have people all the way from Hawaii all the way around back to Australia. So we make it work. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, we'll come to questions at the end of the discussion, but yeah, thank you.
So my name is Gonzalo. I've been working remotely for about almost 5 years now. I used to work in a regular company in Porto with an office, everybody working there. After that, I did freelancing for about 1.5 years, and I mostly worked with clients outside of Portugal. And when the opportunity appeared to join Doist, I did. And one of the major reasons was that I really valued the, back in freelancing days, I was able to use, flexible schedule. I was in command, and I really wanted to retain that if I ever worked for a new company. So I was able to do all of that in Doist, and 5 years later, we're here. So we're also fully remote. We do have offices where we have an unusual number of people. So this happens in Porto. We also have an office in Barcelona. We have a tiny office in Taipei with 2 people. But it basically boils down to we have a budget for co-working spaces, and if people want to pool and rent an office to be together, that's fine. So yeah, I guess we'll get into more details later on.
Right. So first of all, thanks for the invite. So my story related with remote is this. So I used to manage development teams remotely back in the day. I also was a founder for 2.5 years from a remote position, which is very, very tough. So my team was all in Lisbon. I was remotely in London for 2.5 years. And more recently, I moved back to Lisbon, and now I have remote people in my team from Barcelona. And I was just telling them that actually today I had more people working remotely than in the office. Maybe because it was a national holiday yesterday, maybe not, but that's it. So that's pretty much it. So I founded, just to give some context, I founded Landing Jobs back in 2014, and we have some remote positions for developers in our site, but it's something that I want to start working more, because I see clearly we have not a full room, but almost. There's more tendency for developers, people like us, to start working remotely and all the benefits of flexible work lifestyle.
All right, thank you for those introductions. Actually, yeah, let's just jump right into the first question that we'd like to discuss. You told me, Pedro, that you guys have some remote employees, but most of them are not developers, whereas you guys, your teams are mostly completely remote. So what is the reason that you guys don't have remote developers, or why aren't you looking into that? Are there any particular challenges that you're facing? And what is the difference between that and your situation? And why do you guys have remote employees who are developers?
Yeah, so first of all, I guess it comes down to history. So both of your companies are remote first. Mine is not. So we try to be as remote friendly as possible. But to be honest, we will never be remote first unless we do a really dramatic change. Could happen, but I'm not seeing it happen in the future. We used to have remote developers in the past, and it's something we will have again. So it's not an issue there. In regards to the specific case where we have business development account managers working out of Barcelona, I mean, we found these people. They were talented. They are in the market. It just made sense for us. We took a different approach for the UK market and the German market. So we brought the people here, but to be honest, they are almost never in the office. So that might change as well. So I guess our path is to become more and more and more remote friendly, but it will be very difficult for us to be remote first.
Okay.
Oh, well, for us, I think it's the as Pedro was saying, it's the origin of the company. Actually, Todoist, our first product, was originally a side project. of Amir. And when things started picking up, he actually did not want to create a company. So he hired a bunch of freelancers for support, for web development, for marketing, and he was working on this freelance basis with everyone until he realized that long-term things were not going to work out. So he actually started to trying to build a company and hire people. That's where I came in. But the roots remain because some of the people he hired were the freelancers he was working with originally, and they were across the globe. So I agree. Like the roots are very important.
Yeah, same with GitLab. Just like you were saying, history affects that immensely. And for example, at GitLab, the way it started, our CTO right now, Dmitry, he started the project in Ukraine at home when he didn't have any running water even. And how that was his open source project that he started and published online. And that caught up the attention of Sid, our CEO, in Amsterdam. So just the beginning of the story starts remote, right? As it started developing and building itself into a team or to a company, it was in our DNA to just continue that. And actually, the same advantages that make us want to hire remote developers apply for other areas as well, which you want to find talent wherever it is, and capture the best talent at that. And what supports developers in our company is the same sort of culture that supports marketing or business, or other areas. So it's just a natural choice. Just keep growing in that direction because it's been working great for us so far.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that if you want to get hired as a remote developer, apply for companies who have that in their DNA, who have remote first philosophies to begin with. Is that right?
I guess.
I would agree.
Can I go like? There's many different forms of remote. So one thing I know for sure. So we run a survey for developers this year, and 90% of them want some form of remote. 30% of them was full remote, so work from anywhere, whether it's a Nomad or from my home, doesn't matter. 30% of them was most of the time out of the office, but can go to the office whenever I want. And this was like 20%, and 30% was work from the office um, some amount of time, but also have the possibility of home. There was only 10% that were I just want to work at the office. I guess they really want to do the split, which it's understandable. I guess, well, not my cup of tea, but totally fine. What I'm trying to say is, and what we see on landing jobs, we work with several multiple companies, and when it comes to remote options, there's many things you need to talk about: location, time zone, also the type of work. You were like, I guess your first question was into the way like business development developers, can they do that remote? I believe they can. So when this is just to give like the multiple types of remote work that there is, because when we talk about remote work, when you guys go and search for a remote job, maybe the first step is actually working for a company that allows some flexibility. So you can work from home half of the time, go in the office at the other half, and so you don't need to go to like jump in to full remote. Because I have bad news for you. We work with companies like Hotjar, same thing, and their pipeline is huge. Their pipeline of talent is huge. It's not very easy to go in. These guys are top talent. They got in because they're really, really good. Now you have to be really, really good to go into these companies because the market is backwards. They got the power. They can choose the best talent because they also can access the best talent in the world. So it's not that easy to go into remote first companies.
Okay, so does that mean then that, as an entry level role, do you guys hire remote, or is it only limited for maybe more experienced or senior positions? How does that work for you guys?
That's a great question. So at the moment, at least in developer area at GitLab, we're hiring for intermediate and senior. We don't hire for junior at the moment.
Yeah.
There's not a particular golden rule that you cannot have junior developers in a remote company. You can. It just needs more more mentoring and more hand-holding than an
Yeah.
intermediate. And at this point of growth that we're at, just makes more sense for that level of seniority. Now, that being said, I've never worked in a remote company that was hiring juniors, but the same thing applies. But at the moment, we're preferring intermediate and senior. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, it's very similar for us. So, hiring someone senior is, in our experience, the safer bet. We have hired junior people, though, because it's very rare, but some people occasionally, they will do the interview, the panel, whoever is hiring will agree, this person does not have the amount of experience we are looking for. But for some other reason, the way they talk, the things they've done, maybe even the side projects that they currently are working on that they show off during the interview, some people you will get this gut feeling like there's a huge amount of potential here. And we've had more success than not trusting this gut feeling. Having said that, in the last 2 years, we have hired probably close to 15, 20 people. Out of those, only 2 fit this description. So it is a minority. I totally agree with you about maybe not trying to jump head in with remote first companies because there are so many options out there, and you can have more or less flexibility. And I think focusing on only remote first companies can also be very tough unnecessarily, because if all you want is to maybe work from home or from a co-working space 3 days a week, there are a lot of remote friendly companies who can offer that.
Another option is going freelance. I guess that's if you really want to be full remote, be able to travel, do whatever you want, then freelance might be the way to go. And then platforms like Upwork and others might be the way to go. But it's not easy to build a rep in those platforms. It's what I'm trying to say. It's not a easy thing to do.
Okay, so what kind of skills do you look for when you're then looking for remote developers? Let's just talk about the entry level, because you mentioned something about being impressed by their side projects. When you say side projects, do you mean things which are from Upwork, or do you mean things
Anything
which are from GitHub?
Anything like
GitHub. That's fine. That's fine. I'll get over it. I'm kidding. Forgive you. Can I go? I think that was the license for that. So we look for everything. Just like you said, there's a lot of gut feeling involved in assessing a developer. It can be this side project that they created, like really dumb, just for being featured on Hacker News, or it could be contributions for open source really play a huge role. So you were suggesting the freelance path. There's another path, which is just pick the open source project that you really care about and just work at it and put in the work, and then that thing is visible, and it's very visible for someone who's hiring, seeing, right? He or she not only had the knowledge to participate in an open source project, but they had the will to go out and help out a project, which to our company is very core to our values. Okay. So there's a big alignment there. So it goes from anything that you've been working on that is not your job. There's no longer the excuse that the client was tough, they didn't allow me to give more time to whatever you want to develop as a skill. If it's your side project, it's your side project. You were making the calls, right? And that's a great. So we've had a couple of candidates that really impressed in that department. So I'm hiring for front end, so there might be some front end people in the room. We had a couple of candidates that had a couple of side projects involving accessibility. That's usually something that for clients is not really high on the priority list, but the fact that they took care of that in the side project tells me they know this and they value this. So that's a great plus for that developer. So some stuff like that makes you stand out of the crowd is important, especially because of the size of the pipelines. At the moment, I can tell you that we're around 200 people in the pipeline for front end. And we have to go through all of that just today.
Same for us.
Right.
I just wanted to mention that it does not necessarily need to be... Okay, so rewinding a bit. This last month, our marketing team did like an internal study there's a lot of statistical error here because we are roughly 65 people, and we tend to retain people for a long time. But still, they looked at our company's history and defined success as having someone in the company for a long time, and the lack of success having someone fired. There is a clear correlation between how, for us, and again, a ton of statistical error, there is a clear correlation between side projects and success within Doist than not having one. But they don't need to be technical. We have Scott, he's from the UK, he's a wedding photographer on his free time.
Okay, so that's how you get hired as a remote developer.
Right now it counts. Like, talk about the things you like. We have Nuno from Lisbon, and he loves motorcycles, and he disassembles them and puts them in boxes in his garage, and after 2 years he's like, I feel like riding that again. So he goes back and assembles it again. So that kind of
stands out.
Nerdiness.
Who does that?
Really goes, I think, into your day-to-day job.
Yeah.
Because it really, for us, again, statistical error. So I just want to make this disclaimer as much as I can. We're starting to feel like it transpires into the way you approach your day-to-day job with, you care. You are able to care about stuff. And this is very important in remote for many reasons. You can't micromanage people. I mean, I would highly suggest not even trying to do that. You need people who are independent, who take initiative, and who are, I will say the forbidden word, passionate. Although I'm not saying this as an 80-hour week kind of way. And of course, if you have this person who disassembles motorcycles on their free time, they can dedicate themselves into something. It shows that they can. And
yeah, I think this is very important. I'll let you speak in a second, because one of the things that we check, we have a list of values that is valid for all areas of GitLab, not just for developers. And one of them is being a manager of one, just like you were saying, being able to manage yourself, and that comes into play when you're doing a side project, whether it's disassembling motorcycles or just playing with Lego and having a YouTube channel and putting that out there. So that's you managing yourself outside of work, and that brings experience to the table. Pedro, you want to add something?
Yeah, just complementing or just giving another angle. Probably that's the reason why you don't hire many junior developers. The micromanaging thing, like with junior developers, not all of them, but with most of them, you need some level of mentoring, and that might not be very remote friendly. That mentoring, still, it's possible, of course, but that might be the explanation. Okay, this lack of experience, this lack of how to manage yourself, your work. I mean, you need years of experience to know that when you guys started, probably you weren't the best professionals like you are today, right? So you need those years, those flight hours.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you're saying is that being self-driven and motivated, and also showing initiative are really important things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of being self-driven and having a lot of motivation, what kind of expectations do you have from your remote employees? Like, do they have to be in the same time zone? Do they have to be on Slack all the time or Skype during working hours? What is your setup like? What are the tools you use to keep on the same page with the rest of the team?
Okay, so in this case, because it's salespeople, results. That's it. That's how I know it's going well. But then the level of engagement they have with the rest of the team. So they're, especially because they're remote, their need to connect. It's not very measurable, but you just see it. And if I don't feel their need, because I've been remote, I know what it is to go after that human connection. Especially being the founder, I really needed to go after it. With them, if I feel it's not happening, it's because it's not going very well. Not sure if I answered the question.
I think that's a good answer. Yeah.
So we don't have any kinds of synchronization by default. So This was something we have improved over the years, and right now we kind of like we embrace async as much as we can. That means, most teams have weekly meetings. We just expect everybody to be reasonable. Don't try to meet after lunch if that means somebody else will meet after dinner. So we just expect people to be reasonable. Occasionally we bump into problems. Like very recently, I had a meeting myself here with someone from the US and someone from Taipei. That's
very challenging. Yeah.
I attended a meeting at 1 a.m. But that's the reasonable part. I'm a night owl. Attending a meeting at 1 a.m. for me is better than attending one at 8 a.m. So in the end, it's fine. But we don't try to synchronize outside of that. We have some emergency channels for when things really go bad. But that's the only time we actually ping others actively, interrupt them. So async.
Yeah, that's a great word for us as well. So one of the things that we have in our values, and it's written in our documentation that is shared amongst all employees, is this thing about being asynchronous. We do not expect nobody to be online when we ask for help, right? So the idea is, if I need help from someone, I'll just leave him a message on Slack, and he or she could answer in 5 minutes. They could take an hour or 5 hours. It doesn't matter. The point is the way that we structure our work. It means that if I'm blocked here, I have a couple of other deliverables to work on.
Yeah.
So I'll just jump on to the next one. And if it gets to a point that I'm getting delayed, then I'll just schedule a synchronous meeting if it gets to that. And then we just schedule a call and then we jump on Zoom and we sort it out. But by default, like you just said, asynchronous is the only way to make all of this work, especially because we also don't have, like to your question, we don't have any restriction regarding time zones. Even when we're working on it as a team and an issue gets assigned to multiple people, like a back end, a front end, and a UX designer, this can span 3 continents on its own. And it's challenging sometimes, but it also comes with the freedom of remote. And we have a couple of colleagues that have kids, so they prefer to have like a bigger lunch hour. Instead of being an hour, they take like 3 or 4 hours of lunchtime to then be able to play with their kid or go take them to the park or something. And they will be available at night because babies tend to sleep really early. So, and that's okay because we don't track hours. It's written in our documentation that you're actually, I don't like to use the word forbidden, but you are actually disencouraged to mention how many hours you work because that's not about how many hours you work, right? It's not a factory. This means results. Same thing for developers. It's for business, but it's also for developers. Are you finishing your assignments on time?
Yeah.
And if not, your manager will pick up on that and see what's happening, why you're not delivering work. And if we can see that it's just because it's not being dedicated enough, that's what it's about. It's not about the hours that you're working or if you're online at 8 a.m. We had one of our product managers that joined a couple of months ago. He was struggling really hard to keep up with the rhythm until he realized that his problem is that he's not a morning person. He was getting up at like 9 a.m. So just like, I'll just start waking up at noon and schedule all of that thing to afternoon. And it works for him. It works for him, might not work for other people. So that's what remote gives you. It's the freedom to, it's sort of an anecdote, but it's the freedom to go to the supermarket at 3 p.m. where nobody else is going to the supermarket. And it gets a while to get used to that. But once you get to that point, then it's all of that, all of the downsides of not having people next to you, it pays off.
Okay, yeah, great. That's very insightful. So as I understand, you have a lot of flexibility, and that's why, as Pedro was mentioning, a lot of people are now opting to have remote work as their primary, they're saying that developers are saying that they want to have remote work. A lot of people have this idea that they can have a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom with that. And you mentioned that some of the downsides are that you may not have your colleagues next to you and all of that. Motivation and initiative are something important that you mentioned. We have a room full of very highly motivated people here because they chose to spend their Friday evening like this, so listening to us. So I think that's not a problem here. I wanted to ask you, so if somebody wants to start out as a remote developer, or even eventually has their eyes set on becoming a remote developer, what are the skills that they should pick up? What are the things that they should work on? And we mentioned that side projects could help them distinguish themselves, but what are those things, and where could they find remote jobs that they could apply for?
Okay, we can go to landing jobs.
Your first remote hire.
That's one. Sorry about the self promotion. I guess like we can talk about hard skills. We can talk about soft skills. Regarding hard skills, I mean, you have to be really good. Your thinking process, your engineering thought process. If you're a product manager, you have to be good at what you do. Designers, same thing. Doesn't matter. Business people as well. So hard skills, you can evaluate that as a company, and you're either good or you're not. The more experience you have, probably the better you will become. That's it. Soft skills. Okay, and maybe you guys can answer this for me, but I realize communication, and you said asynchronous communication, which is totally fine, but it's still a form of communication. So I guess even being remote first, you need to take care more of this than maybe in a synchronous environment like an office.
Yeah, I would say that it's even more important. As you were asking the question, my first thought was communication.
Yeah, for me as well.
And it's like you said, hard skills are important regardless of whether you're finding a remote job or not.
Yeah.
But the soft skills and I've interviewed candidates that we've rejected just because of the soft skills weren't there, and that's part of the point. The communication thing is that for the remote thing to work, you have to over communicate, and knowing how to communicate with your colleagues when they're across the globe, or being mindful of their time, being understanding, being supportive, plays a whole different level of role or importance in a remote job. So I would say the most thing is work on your communication. You might be already communicating great with your colleagues. I don't mean that as a common thing that you need to work on your communication, but to adapt your communication to the remote environment is really critical. I, for one, grew up with IRC, Messenger, that sort of thing. And then when I was studying in college, I used to live with my brother and my cousin. We lived in the same apartment, and we would communicate through Messenger. And some girlfriends at the time would be like, "Why don't you just get up and go and talk to them?" And I mean, I don't want to interrupt him. I don't know if he's available. So that mindfulness of being concerned about the other person and being able to communicate asynchronous is key to remote. Not natural for everyone, but it can be worked on. For your second question, before I pass on to you, there's plenty of job boards. Landing Jobs is the best one.
GitLab is also way better than GitHub.
I did this Bitbucket all the way, wasn't it?
I don't know what that is. But there's plenty of job boards. We work remotely is also one very good one. Yeah. Authentic Jobs also has a couple. But yeah, just that's part of finding the list of jobs. You have to find the company that aligns to your values, not just remote work. That's all?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you guys said. I just wanted to mention additionally that if you work remotely, you're going to write much more than you would if you didn't work remotely. So being able to communicate clearly and in a succinct way is like very, very critical. So if you feel like, for example, your English could be polished, it's a really good investment if you're considering working remotely, because we will definitely screen for that. So yeah, otherwise, totally agree. Hard skills are very important, remote or not remote. We also already talked about the lack of micromanagement. So, being independent, taking initiative, asking for forgiveness instead of permission are all very important traits.
Yeah, you mentioned being good at English. I want to address that for a second. And this is the part of the talk where I quote Gloria from Modern Family. She has a bit in an episode where she says, "You have no idea how smart I sound in Spanish." and she's absolutely right. one of our thing at GitLab is being diverse, and we look to being a diverse team. But we have to understand each other, and we have to not allow language to be a barrier. So even though we are mindful of diversity, being able to communicate in English is key to thrive in a remote company. So I just wanted to put Gloria in there.
The wonderful thought on a Friday evening.
Let me just add one thing. Our copywriter, Becky, she likes to say, show me how you write, I'll tell you how you think. But in honesty, what she's really getting into, so there's more context to this, but is that, the first time you write something, especially if it's a long form post or email, it's going to be big if it's any important topic. The thing is, if you spend a few minutes more with that and you kind of rephrase things, reorganize them, etc., you will end up with a much shorter post that goes much faster to the point. And you spent 15, 20 minutes and you saved everybody else 10 minutes. So, and this in remote, it's very important that you don't spend your whole day reading or writing. You have, real work to do. So again, I'm just adding to what you were saying.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you, what is your ideal interview for a remote candidate go like? Is there something specific that's a deal breaker? I guess communication is very important. We've touched on that topic, but are there specific things that applicants should watch out for when they're interviewing for a remote role and shouldn't like stay away from that stuff?
Can I tell a story?
Please.
So I was helping. I rarely do this, but every now and then I get a client I really like. Usually they are startups, and I actually jump on board and go on our talent development team or business development team and do the work for them. So I go back to the basics. And there was one. They were hiring a part-time site reliability engineer. That was interesting. And this is I'm not sure if this is good or not. I haven't made up my mind about it. But it was a remote role, and I've interviewed like people from all over the world for this job. And site reliability engineers, like the people say like developers tend to be more introverts than SREs. They are in the very introvert zone, and was doing the interviews. And funny enough, like out of 70 interviews, and yes, there was a lot of people applying because it was a very interesting role. And so I had to like drop like 300 and only interview 70 because it was just me. And two of them, only two, put the camera up. And those two were the ones instantly I knew I'm not going to hire them.
So put the camera off is your tip?
They were like super, like there was this guy that told me, not one of those who didn't put the camera up. He told me, dude, drop me, he was American, drop me in a forest, I build you the fucking internet.
Oh.
That's it.
Okay.
And this is the sort of quirkiness, geekiness I was looking for. And the people who put the camera up, they gave me another feeling of like super extrovert and salesy.
Yeah.
That's not what I want. And so this is the other way.
So you want the guy who builds the internet in the forest?
I was looking for someone who could communicate, but essentially someone when shit went down, like when things got chaotic. Like I met a guy who dropped the booking.com site for 15 minutes and he was able to solve it in 15 minutes. That's cold-blooded. I wanted cold-blooded people, not hot-blooded or salesy people. This was for this specific role. Now, let's say product management. Probably I want to see them. And,
So what you're saying is sell your skills, not yourself, basically.
Yeah. So in this specific case, so it not always like we were talking about communication. It can go the other way. Over communication. Yeah. I'd like this specific case. I don't want over communication. I want the job done.
Yeah.
When like these guys, they need to keep the machine running. That's it.
I actually have an insight on this because I don't know what happened, but in the last 6 months, we have rejected a lot of job applications because they focus on the wrong things. And let me provide some context. It's important to realize that when you apply for a job, you intend to go work for a company, and this company has a goal. If it's a for-profit company, it is to do whatever they do and make money. So when you apply for a remote job and you write a huge cover letter saying that you really want to work remotely, you really want to work remotely, you really want to work remotely, I'm going to reject you without even speaking to you, because your values are not aligned with mine. If I'm hiring for, I don't know, a front-end role, I'm hoping you are excited about React or something else, or that you explored our code bases, front end. It's kind of, and you have questions, that you're curious. And remote work, it's just a tool in the arsenal. It should not be the goal. So these red flags have been appearing, and we are currently making changes. We think we've positioned ourselves. If you go look at our landing pages, maybe we are too remote first right now.
Interesting.
But it's important to, basically what I'm saying is you have to keep in mind what goal the company has for that position and align yourself with that. If you focus only on yourself, and in this case you focus only on working remotely, having total flexibility, and you don't even consider the job itself, then you're going to be out of luck very fast.
That we have one thing called the Your Fit model, which is basically what we use for matchmaking. So helping people realize if this should stay at their current job, get a new job within the current company, or find a new job, elsewhere. And we have four angles, four axes. One of them is environment. Another one is economics. Another one is challenge, and which was kind of where you were going. Another one is competences they can build on. And remote work goes into the environment thing, which is flexibility and office, no office kind of thing. It's just one of the things when companies evaluate you, and when you evaluate the job opening, you need to consider. But then you have everything else. And guess what? The companies, I don't care if you want to be remote or not. I want to care why you care about working with us.
Yes.
Remote is just, I'm not going to say a perk, it's part of the environment.
Okay, so show that you care about what the company's mission is and the values.
Like, why are you looking for this job? Is it because you want more responsibility? Is it because you want, well, in that sense, like a leadership role? Do you want to evolve from a mid-level to a senior developer, eventually in the future become a principal engineer? What is it for you?
What's your career going? Is it the same at GitLab as well?
Yeah, all of what you've been saying sound really familiar, because we had cases like those where the resume looks good. We do send an assessment exercise, but before we actually have some FaceTime. But the assessment looked great, but then we start talking to them, and they either like the over communication here doesn't apply really well in the interview. You want to be meaningful with your communication. Like you ask questions. Don't start telling me a story about just to show off other parts of your profile. Just be to the point and meaningful. But we've had candidates that made mistakes that are so basic for any kinds of roles. So that happens a lot. Knowing the company, knowing the values, aligning, that applies to all job interviews, not just remote.
Do you guys give the fizz buzz to everybody?
Not the fizz buzz, but we do have a code challenge. And the thing about the code challenge is we want to see. I've hired people who failed the code challenge on the mission, because what we're looking for is people who can think and are comfortable in the language that we're using. So even though, like you said, we're hiring for front end, we want people that are excited for React, but we don't work with React at GitLab. We work with Vue, which is a competitor. But if you only know one tool, and that's sort of a warning for everyone, is like if you only know one tool, like a library, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for someone who has experience that will live throughout your career, and whether you know the language that's beneath it, where you're comfortable with the language. And you'd be surprised how many people come into an interview without being prepared. like going and go back to the basics. Make sure you remember like the basics of the language that you work on, whether it's Ruby, whether it's JavaScript. You have to know the language that you're working for.
Do they come in thinking they're applying for GitHub instead?
that has never happened.
Okay.
Well, but that's a good point. So we've had people complimenting us when we did when we raised a new round. Like a candidate complimented us and congratulated us on the interview. So that's a sign that they're aware of what GitLab is.
Okay.
And on my company in particular, we are very open. That's part of our values, being transparent. So our handbook that guides all processes inside GitLab is open to
It's
the
amazing.
world. Thank you. And the thing is, we've had candidates who've never read it. So they come in and they have no clue how they should be presenting themselves. And if they looked at the handbook, they knew exactly what we're looking for. One of our values is iteration. So we expect people to be comfortable in working in iterative approach. And we have questions specific tailored to measure that value. And most of them are not even like aware. Like they give us answers that are like, you didn't get it, did you? Like, and the part of that or the advice is do your homework. And that applies to remote or non-remote. So I don't think I have anything.
So be
Well, I do
motivated, have initiative, do your homework.
Great communication.
And communication.
Great communication.
The one thing I would add, though, is there is space for introverts at remote companies. We have a couple of colleagues. The thing is, the companies that are remote usually tend to be more mindful of that, and we are respectful. But the point is, we need to know what you're doing. We need to know that you need to be able to communicate your work, but we don't expect you to just suddenly become an extrovert just because you're working on a remote company. There is space for that as well in remote.
Yeah, I guess communication and knowing how to communicate goes
Yeah.
from extroverts to
Yeah.
introverts. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay, very quickly, we'll do one last question and then we'll go to the audience because we're running
Great.
out of time. Is remote work a trend, especially amongst developers? Is it going to rise, or are we going to see a shift back towards office environments? Just quickly, what are your thoughts on that?
Can I?
Go.
We have a blog post called The Age of Remote Workers, which I recommend everybody to go and read. It's not that big, but we really believe that remote work is the next evolution, such as the Industrial Revolution. We really believe that remote work can solve a lot of the issues we are facing as a society right now, such as we have like people are forced to migrate to big cities if they want to land big jobs. There's a lot of issues like with the economic equilibrium between big cities and everywhere else. Families that are disappearing because people work a ton and they have big commutes because almost nobody can live near the really central offices, and so on and so on. There's a lot more in the blog post, but in general, if you really consider remote work, and if we can nail this, and this is up to companies like ours, like we need to be there 10 years from now and be efficient, become a role model. When the world sees that this works and this works well, I think remote work is going to explode. But for now, I believe we are kind of like still in the validation phase because remote companies are just not big or have not existed for long enough yet to be considered, this is a perfect example of a long-term remote company. In fact, some of the earlier role models like GitHub, they went back.
Huge respect for GitHub. So
they carried the remote flag for many years, and everybody kind of like, at least I did, expected them to become one of the big references in this space. And then I'm not sure if it's related, but they got some round of funding, and then they started like retracing their
now
steps.
We can buy an office for ourselves.
Well, maybe that's the reason.
Going to your question, no, I don't think it's a fad. I think it's here to stay. I think the challenge of remote is knowing how to do it properly. And like you said, having more role models will play a big part of that. So I truly believe that the fact that GitLab is able to do remote so well is the culture. The culture and certain processes and habits, things that have been built into the culture play a huge part in making the remote thing work. So I think that is only going to grow. So as an example, our VP of product, he's Dutch, and he married a Portuguese girl, and they were living in Lisbon until they started considering buying a house, and they'd be like, "Are we going to buy a house in Lisbon with a market like this? Hell no." They're in Braga right now because they don't have to be near a big city, so they can choose where they want to be and go where they need to be. The work, being at a certain place to work, will start being less and less of an issue for roles who can be remote. Not everything can be
Yeah,
remote,
of
but those
course.
who can, it's a matter of having more role models and companies adopting culture approaches that will support remote, not the other way around.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think like from the talent side, trend is there. It's not going to stop. I mean, we're monitoring this for years now, and it's increasing. From the company side, it's increasing as well, but at a very slow pace. What's happening is a flexibility thing I talked before. So companies allowing more work from home or even remote days, which is different. Um, it's starting to happen more and more. So it's starting to be a given. That's good. Um, let's see what happens. I think we need management models.
Yeah.
For the corporates, for the ones that will be very difficult to change, for even scale ups, small medium enterprises, for them to know how to do it, like kind of a guidebook. And we need this to become a management function. That's the only way it's going forward. That's my belief. But yeah, let's go.
One of the reasons why the handbook at GitLab is open, because we want more companies to learn from us.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that we had in our sessions to the CEO that everybody onboarding goes through was, someone asked, don't you think that the remote model will break down as soon as we get to a certain size? And Sid's answer was, we don't have to hire another office. Like, we can grow infinitely in terms of people. The problem is the processes.
Yeah.
Will the process hold with that many people?
Size.
The reason, the answer to that is just keep adapting and experimenting and trying, and then we'll document our way. So we'll try to learn, try to have you learn from our mistakes, if that's.
Do you have a book, an open source
It's a handbook.
book, a handbook available for
I
running a remote?
highly recommend. It's
Okay.
really, really good.
And everybody in the company contributes, from HR, from people in business roles. The first thing they do when they onboard, or one of the first things they do, is contribute to the website. They check out the code, they change the code, they open a merge request, they update the website, so that they learn how to update the documentation later.
Okay, so remote work is probably going to be on the rise and management models are required. Well, that's the last question that I have for you all. Thank you so much for coming out here and taking the time. We're going to take a few audience questions. If you guys have questions, just raise your hands and Luis will come with the microphone.
Okay. Good evening. So I will start with this question. Mainly, what I would like to know is, okay, there is this full remote job that you might be doing, and then there is this hybrid solution, like half of the time, certain amount of time, be remote or not. I can see that in some way, if you are remote, and sometimes there might be some friction about the communication and the way you deal with your colleagues, and then if you go to office, in a sort of, okay, let's heal a little bit, this friction, it will be helpful. Yeah. So, but in your case, mostly, and you are fully remote. And don't you feel the need for this? And how do you cope with this situation?
That is the most common question we get. Thank you. Can I go first? So one of the things that is entirely true, you need face-to-face time because we're humans, right? So one of the things we do is, like, every 9 months, we have a summit where the entire company gathers at a certain location in the world. So the last one was in Cape Town in August, where we got to meet the entire company. So that's one, and that's a permanent thing. Other things is up to us to decide how to solve that. So one of the things that the Portuguese GitLabbers do is every month we decide one day and we gather each other in a central location in the country, and we work together during that day. And that's just because all we need is Wi-Fi and a coffee, good coffee, by the way. Life is too short for bad coffee. So, so that's one of the things that we, as an initiative, we took to see each other face to face. And as an anecdote example, on my third day at GitLab, I met all the Portuguese GitLabbers because they had a conference in Braga. I traveled to Braga, I met them, and that was my welcome. So the myth that you don't get face-to-face time, it's about the company, it's about the culture that you have. It is possible to circumvent that. If you need that human contact, and it's normal, get a co-working space. I just canceled mine just because I'd rather go and visit my friends' offices. So what I'll do, I'll just set up lunch, go lunch with them. Hey, can I crash at your office? I just need the Wi-Fi password. I'll be good. So it's up to you. It's the freedom to do whatever works for you as an individual, and the company to support it.
You can crash at mine. You can crash at mine office.
We got that. Yeah. Thank you.
For us, it's the same. We have a yearly retreat, so a little less often, where we get everybody on the same location. Teams recently started doing team retreats. They, not all, but they try to, there's a cool conference, so everybody goes and they stay for a week.
Yep.
So most people meet face to face at least twice per year. But then, although we are very not against, but we try our best to optimize meetings, we're not anti meetings, and most teams have a weekly meeting where everybody meets face to face for half an hour, 1 hour. People have one-on-ones with their team leads on a monthly basis, and occasionally, we're not doing them right now, but it's like we turn them on, turn them off. We do informal hangouts where random people get together. Every month, 5 or 6 people at random will get together for an hour and talk about random things, cats, baking, whatever. Which, if we're 60 something, it takes about a year to rotate everybody. But still, but I agree, face to face is very, very important. Especially because, personally, I feel like when you haven't met someone face to face, it's very hard to understand intention sometimes. Every person has their own personality and nuances, and when you're communicating by text, sometimes we have a tendency of reading between the lines, and most often than not, this is not the best idea. So I would recommend you avoid doing that. Assume nothing. But still, after you meet someone face to face, I feel like written communication becomes a lot clearer, even though it's the exact same quality of communication. It's just like you have a lot more context on that person.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, back there.
Okay. My question actually complements the previous one, because I highly value every coffee break, lunch break, etc., to speak to non-work related talk with my colleagues. And I highly believe this helps the team building and the beliefs to communicate better, to be happier at work. How do you do this? Do you have other ways to do it, or you don't do this at all?
I can go very fast. So at GitLab, we have this thing called coffee break calls that everybody is encouraged to do. And when we are onboarding, we're asked to do 5 of these over the course of 2 weeks, where we'll just go through the team members list and we'll schedule calls with someone for half an hour. We have our link to, everybody has a calendly.com profile that shows their availability. Go in there, punch half an hour, and you go and talk to them about whatever topic you want to talk. So I started doing one with my colleague because he had a poster behind him on his calls of Metropolis, the Fritz Lang movie from the 30s. Like, Paul, do you like old movies? He's like, yeah. Like, I like old movies. Let's schedule a call. So now we're doing that bi-weekly. Every 2 weeks, we just gather up and just challenge each other with movies. So you would do that in an office. It is possible to do that in remote company. Apart from that, we have channels on Slack specifically dedicated for that thing. One of them is gaming. We're a lot of
Yeah.
gamers, of course. So we have a Discord for GitLab where people just gather up and play Fortnite or League of Legends or whatever is the thing, and that is part of like team building, just shooting at each other. So
we do the exact
cool.
same things. We also have, it was Rocket League, the last one. So every month, every 2 months, people get together and do random things.
Overwatch? We need to do a match.
We didn't play Overwatch yet. Only CSGO and Rocket League. Rocket League a couple times, CSGO. This started this summer. So
should do a match.
Maybe you guys could do a tournament between your two companies.
Absolutely.
Shoot at each other instead.
One thing to note, though, is I don't think you have to limit yourself to your company. Like personally, on Wednesdays, I have lunch with other people from Doist in Porto. But on Thursdays, I have like this fixed lunch with other developer friends from college days. Some work in TopTal, others are working as a freelancers, others at the usual Porto companies like Mindera, Blip, etc. So I don't think you have to limit yourself to your company circle. That's one of the really cool things as well about working remotely is that when people are arranging lunch and it's like, oh, for me it's best at midday, for others it's best at 1, for others it's best at 2. You're the person saying, I don't care. Just tell me when it is.
Pedro?
Do we have any other questions? We have time for one more. Okay, 2 more. We'll do 2 more.
Yes. How do you think remote working is affecting salary developers? You have someone in Hawaii, where the cost of living is high, but yet I hear of remote developers taking pay cuts too. So how do you think this is affecting salaries of developers?
That's a hard question. You want to go?
There's 2 angles to that. One is how does that affect the developer himself or herself? Also, the other question, how it's affecting the ecosystem. Okay, so I'll go with the ecosystem. I'll leave the self to them. When I say ecosystem, I mean the other people working in tech. So because of remote work, salaries are going up. So according to our calculations, they went up 10% last year. We predict another 10% this year in Portugal and collectively. One of the reasons is there's more companies establishing themselves in Portugal with forms of remote work. It doesn't have to be full remote, but with forms. So salaries are going up. It's a mixed reason because it's remote work, but it's also not remote work. Okay. So, but I guess the other part has to be you guys.
Sure. So one of the things I can tell is that the way we try to avoid that is we have a salary compensation calculator that takes into account the rent index of the place of the person where they're staying. So if I'm living in Lisbon, so I have a rent index of X, right? So that gets thrown into the equation that calculates my compensation. And then we take seniority level, and then we take experience in that role into account. And on top of that, we have this rule that nobody should be paid less than 2/3 of what you get in San Francisco. So all of that gets factored into a big equation that you can see in our job pages, and you can try it out and sort of give you an interval of how much you can expect at a certain role. And we're constantly revising that. So we do a revision on that index in the benchmarks every year to make sure that we up to date with the market. And the thing is, with a remote, if you don't pay enough to a remote worker, they can just move to another remote company. So we, as a company, have the motivation to keep that up to date and keep people happy. So we do make a lot of career mapping and make sure that they're satisfied in their role, they are evolving, and they are being promoted. There's a lot of promotions internally because we just track everything someone does. And again, it speaks to the transparency value. When someone is promoted, there's a document that highlights all of their achievements, justifying the promotion. So I think that's a concern for remote companies, even more so than non-remote companies, because they're free to go wherever. So if you don't keep them happy, someone else will.
Gonçalo, do you want to weigh in?
I don't have much to add. I agree.
Okay.
Remote is an equalization. I think remote is an equalization factor because, like locations such as Portugal, where salaries are not very high comparatively, remote companies can come in. They can pay above market rates and still pay below market rates for them. So long term, and it's already happening. I think salaries are getting a little less heterogeneous. That's not the correct
Mixed.
pronunciation. Yeah, mixed.
Very right.
Between different countries, and we do exactly the same thing. We have salary formula. We factor in location, seniority, etc., etc.
Okay, well, I think that's all the questions we have time for. Thank you so much, guys, for taking the time out, for coming here and sharing with everyone. And thank you to the audience, to you guys, for spending your Friday evening so productively. Yeah, can we have a big round of applause for everyone, please? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
We're hiring.
Oh, okay.